when adding value to these different shapes to create the illusion of form, I want to make sure that I pay attention to the different values that I actually see. Not what I think is there, but what I actually see. On this side, you'll notice that I put arrows that tell you the different values that we're actually looking at. So I'm helping you learn how to see. Because when we start to render and we start to add value, we want to make sure that we pay attention to what we're actually looking at, and we convey those different values. One thing too that I want to make sure you understand is we're not going to be putting outlines on these things. If you look at the object, there are no outlines. What I'm referring to is that many times when we're actually drawing an object and we actually shaded this in, very often what we do, and we have a tendency of doing, is we put in these outlines around the shapes. Now when you look at that, okay, compared to the cube that's next to it, it's not the same thing. These lines are not on here. So as we're shading this object in this space, pay attention to the values you see. So since I've given you so many pencils, we're going to start with the lightest area, which is right in here, and I'm going to actually use my 4H pencil. But notice when I use my 4H pencil, I'm not actually shading just on that side. I'm going to shade the entire cube. The reason for that is because all the values that you have, the light values, those are underneath here, underneath these. Okay, so I start here. I'm not going to shade each side separately. I'm going to progressively get darker. So I've created this value on this entire cube. Now I'm going to jump over to my 2H pencil and I'm going to shade these two sides to make them darker. So I come in over here. Notice once again, I repeat, I am not drawing outlines. So I'm coming in here. And by adding just a little bit of value, you can see that I've already made a change from here to here, from here to here. It's already getting a little bit darker. Now I'm going to jump over to this side. I'm going to jump over to my HB pencil, and I'm actually going to start to get this in here. So you'll notice that there's dark down here. There's a little bit of reflected light, so it's a little bit lighter, and then it's a little bit darker, but not as dark as here along these sides. So I have to take all of that into consideration. So I'm going to start in here. And as I'm coming up, I'm going to be reducing pressure and just overlapping my lines to make sure that I get this value in there as smooth as possible. Now, it's okay to come up against my edges, but notice when I draw that line in there, it's going to disappear. So it doesn't stay. I use that edge and I create these edges, I create these edges through contrast between the light area and the dark area. Using a light stroke on top of this and overlapping my different values, I start to create the different sides. I start to create more of an illusion of three-dimensionality. Right? And it starts to look more like a realistic cube that I have instead of any old cube, but rather the one that I'm actually looking at. I could actually see the difference between the sides. I could come back in and I could start to adjust as I need to. So I'm going to come into this area here. And I'm going to actually adjust by putting in a little bit more value to clean up those edges. I could take my eraser and I could erase to clean up my edges. And you'll notice I'm starting to create more of the cube shape. That's what I'm going for. Okay, I'm not smudging. Absolutely, positively no smudging. I want you to use all pencil pressure to control the different values or to create these different values. Okay, now I'm actually going to be able to shade in the background in here. Okay, you'll notice how dark it is. And then I'm going to shade the bottom part here. With the bottom part, what people have a tendency of doing is they have a tendency of shading the cast shadow separately from the table. You have to remember, the cast shadow is on the table, so it is technically a dark area or a darker value of the table. So why would you shade them differently or shade them separately? It just doesn't make sense and it doesn't look natural. So come in here, once again, I'm starting with my 2H pencil. Okay, come in here using some very large strokes. I'm just going to basically shade the entire table. Notice I'm getting lighter on this area because when I look at the picture, that's what I see. It's a little bit lighter. Okay, I'm okay with being able to see my pencil marks right now. I'm fine with that. All right, now this area starts to get a little bit darker, so I'm going to come back over them. Notice how I get rid of that edge between the table and the background. Come back over and extend. I'm starting to get a little bit lighter in this area. I'm going to fade it away so it's a little bit darker here than here. That's good. Now I can start coming in with some of my darker values. So since I use my 2H, I could actually jump to my HB, or if I wanted to, I could go to my 2B. I'm going to go my HB pencil because I'm going to get some of these values in here. You'll notice what's darker and what's lighter. So I'm going to come into here, right underneath. So while I start with a line to know where the edge is, watch how that line disappears and it goes into the cast shadow. Right? It disappears into the cast shadow. I'm going to pull it away. And now it starts to look more natural, like this actual cast shadow is on the table. I'm going to keep going, paying attention to what I see as the shadow starts to fade away, the different angles because of the wrinkles. And I always start light and I could always get darker. You get the idea, right? I don't think I necessarily need to keep going. Okay, so you're trying to recreate this using pencil pressure to create the different values, and you're going to layer them as much as possible. Okay, I don't think I necessarily need to show you how to apply that to this, but once again, I want to make sure that when you're doing this, the sphere, you are not outlining. In other words, when I look at this sphere here, I'm not seeing lines around it. Okay, now there shouldn't be any lines, especially in this area here. There's no outline there. The reason why you can see the edge, let me look at here, the reason why you can see the edge is because it's darker around the edge. Okay, so make sure that you pay attention to those things. Now, before I finish up here, you're going to get a kneaded eraser. A kneaded eraser is something that you use that's going to lighten areas if you've gone a little bit too dark. So when I look at my reflected highlight here, I could actually take my kneaded eraser and I could actually just kind of lighten that area if I need to. I'm over lightening just so you could see it. I want to make sure you could tell the difference, okay? So that way you can so you could put back in some light areas if you've gone just a little bit too dark, but you don't want to rely on that pencil, or on the eraser, excuse me. Sorry, you want to rely on your pencils, okay? I'm not done yet, but you get the idea. Eventually, what you're really trying to create is going to be a three-dimensional cube using these different shading techniques. Okay? All right. Good luck.